People think that running really powerful meetings that will wow and impress an executive audience is about being super polished and sounding super smart and always having every single answer. And the truth is, those are not the pieces that are going to help you impress people. What is going to help you impress people is showing up as someone who is driven and determined and ready to get results. And that is something that anyone can learn to do.
Welcome to The Art of Speaking Up, a podcast that helps professional women access the limitless potential that lies within them. I'm your host, Jessica Guzik, and my mission is to help you find that spark inside you that has the power to transform your career in ways you may not have thought possible. I'm so excited that you're here. And now, on to the show.
Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Jess Guzik. I'm a career coach for women. I am here to help you build confidence, develop a super unstoppable voice, and thrive as a leader in your corporate career. And today, I'm going to be teaching you how to run meetings that are impressive for the attendees and audience of your meetings. The tips that you are going to learn in today's episode will help you elevate the quality of your meetings to a level that is impressive even to a very sophisticated executive audience. Now, a lot of people, when they think I need to impress my audience, my meetings and communication needs to be executive friendly, when they think those thoughts, they get stressed out. And they think that in order to run super impressive meetings, they have to be very, very charming and charismatic and extroverted, and they have to over-prepare for the meeting, and they have to come to the meeting ready and able to answer every single question that gets thrown at them. And with all that pressure that they put on themselves, they feel stressed out, it makes them feel anxious, and then ironically, that anxiety makes it difficult for them to bring their best in running their meetings. Now, the good news is you don't need to do those things. Running powerful, impressive meetings is less about you being perfect, and it's less about you having every single answer, and it's much more about you being strategic. In today's episode, I'm going to teach you how to be more strategic in the way that you run your meetings so that they're very impressive to your audience. And I hope that this comes as good news to you because it's not about having all the answers. It's not about feeling perfect every second and every single instance of the meeting. It's just about being thoughtful and knowing how to speak to leaders and executives in a language that is going to resonate. I almost think about it as you are learning the language of leadership. That's what we are doing in this episode. And everything that I'm going to teach you in this episode revolves around one super important concept that really changed my entire career and hopefully will change your entire career. And that is called bias to action. I am going to be teaching you today what bias to action is, why it's so important if you want to be impressive to executive level stakeholders and all stakeholders when you're running meetings. And most importantly, I'm going to teach you how to demonstrate bias to action in your meetings. Now, if the phrase bias to action sounds a little bit intimidating to you, it's not as scary as it sounds. It's a fairly simple tweak that you can make. It does require some courage. It does require some bravery. I'll be talking more about that and the mindset component at the end. But the adjustments that you're going to be making to the way you're speaking and sharing information are quite simple and not super complicated, and they're not like super fancy. So let's talk first about what bias to action is. I'm going to give a couple examples. I'm going to talk about why it matters so much, and I'm going to give you more and more tools to help you incorporate it into your meetings. So bias to action is something that I learned about back when I worked at McKinsey. And bias to action literally means that you have a bias towards action. It means that your default pattern is that you find the next step and you take that next action. People who have a strong bias to action tend to execute in a more powerful way. They tend to move projects forward at a faster pace. They tend not to be slowed down by uncertainty and ambiguity because their habit is always to be searching for the next step and to go ahead and take the next step right away. And when you have that mental habit of always pushing yourself to take that next step, even when things get hard, even when obstacles come up, even when things are ambiguous, even when things are uncertain, when you have that habit, you can accomplish bigger things and you can take on more complex execution because that bias to action helps you keep pushing things forward despite the inevitable obstacles that arise when you're taking on bigger, broader pieces of work. This is why having bias to action and showing your boss and showing leaders at your company that you possess this trait is really helpful in accelerating your path to promotion and leadership, because companies want people in leadership positions who have a strong bias to action and who can maintain a solid pace of execution, even on more complex, challenging pieces of work and initiatives. Now, the cool thing is that you can show people that you have a strong bias to action in the way that you run your meetings, the language that you use, and the way that you interact with your stakeholders has the potential to show them that you are someone who possesses a strong bias to action. You are someone who doesn't get slowed down when things get hard. You are someone who knows how to keep things moving forward, even when the path ahead is challenging. You are someone who is there to get it done. And when people start to sense that you are someone who is there to get it done, they think of you as more of an authority. They think of you as more of a leader. They offer you more support and buy-in, and it really, really helps speed up your path to leadership, like I mentioned. So we are going to talk about how you demonstrate bias to action when you are running meetings. So I'm going to start with a really simple example, and then I'm going to share more examples of how you would weave this in throughout the course of a meeting, because it's something that is present continuously in the language that you're using and in the way that you're engaging with your audience and your stakeholders. So bias to action is something that you will demonstrate throughout your meeting, at the beginning, at the middle, and at the end of the meeting. Let's talk about what it would look like at the beginning of the meeting. Now, an example of kicking off a meeting in a way that is not demonstrating bias to action, that is not demonstrating that you are someone who executes in a really determined, really forward-moving way. An example of someone who isn't that would be kicking off a meeting by saying something like, "Welcome, everyone. I'm looking forward to walking you through my team's proposal for our product launch." So in this fictional meeting, this person is kicking off this meeting by introducing the topic of the meeting, which is their team's proposal for a product launch. Now, let me be clear. There's nothing wrong with this. There's nothing horrible about this. There's nothing bad about this, but there is a lot of missed potential to show people your leadership. I wanted to pause to quickly let you know that I created a free worksheet that pairs with this episode. It guides you step by step on how to demonstrate bias to action in your next meeting, so you can show people that you are not just running a meeting, you are stepping up and leading. If you are ready to seriously stand out, go ahead and grab the worksheet for free by clicking the link in the show notes or by going to jessguzikcoaching.com/bias to action. Back to the episode. So if you were to incorporate bias to action in the way that you are kicking off this specific meeting, what you would ask yourself is you would work backwards and ask yourself, what is the action that we are accomplishing in this meeting? You would figure out what that is, and you would set that expectation and talk about that action right at the start of the meeting. That is going to set the vibe and the expectation that we are here to get things done. We are not just talking about something. We are not just chit-chatting about something. We have work to do, and I am here to make sure that we do it. So here's how you express that vibe and express that bias to action through your language. The way that you would do it is, instead of kicking off your meeting by saying, "Welcome, I'm going to be sharing my team's proposal for a product launch," Instead, what you would say is, welcome. Today, we are going to be approving my team's proposal for a product launch. I'm going to be walking you through the elements of the launch, and I'm going to be seeking your green light so that we can get this project underway. Now, what I want to point out about that is not only am I saying different words, but it's going to give off a different vibe and a different energy. It puts me and my audience on the hook right from the start of the meeting. It gets us out of relaxed mode and we're just here to half listen mode. And it snaps us into focus and creates a sense of urgency. This sense of urgency and this feeling that you are creating in the room is a good thing. It shows people that you are someone who is always moving the ball forward. When you do this, your audience will pay more attention, they will engage more, they will take you more seriously, you will have more productive meetings, you will have more productive projects, and people will view you as more of a leader. Your authority and credibility will grow. Now, this is a subtle adjustment, and it's an adjustment that you're going to want to make, not just at the beginning of the meeting, but this is something that you're going to be doing at the beginning, the middle, and the end of the meeting. There are opportunities throughout the entire span of a meeting to demonstrate bias to action. And in today's episode, I'm going to show you more of the places where you can incorporate it, and I'm going to be giving you examples. But before I do that, I want to talk about why this is so important and why it matters so much to adjust your language in this way. Part of the reason that this is so important, especially if you're someone who is growth-oriented and who wants to move up into leadership and get promoted within your company, when executives and leaders are thinking about who they want to promote, one of the things that they're doing is they're trying to imagine who will be able to succeed and drive impact in this bigger role, who is going to be able to do a really good job in a role where they have broader responsibilities. And typically, to get big promotions and to make those big jumps towards executive levels, you are going to be stepping into a role that's going to be a stretch. You are being offered a role that exceeds the type of tasks that you have done in the past. So you have to give leaders and executives the ability to imagine that you can handle more. They have to be able to take their understanding of who you are and what you do today, and they have to superimpose that understanding of you onto a future role and imagine in their minds that you are succeeding in a role that is bigger and more complex. And one of the most powerful ways that you can help them imagine that is by helping them see that you are someone who always gets it done. You get it done no matter what is put in front of you. You are someone who comes in with drive. You are someone who comes in with determination. You are someone who isn't stopped by obstacles. And when you communicate in a way that demonstrates bias to action and in a way that is moving a room of people towards an outcome, it is easier for them to imagine you handling more because they can so clearly see how vigorous you are in terms of pushing your existing work forward. And then it becomes easier for them to imagine oh, wow, if she's moving this thing forward at this rate and with this level of determination, she can definitely handle this other harder, more complicated thing. So you're showing them that you can do so much more and go so far beyond your current scope and current set of responsibilities. Now, the reason that I'm emphasizing why this is so important is because I think a lot of times we underestimate just how much small, subtle shifts in the way we communicate can have an impact on how our audience perceives us. And a trap that I see a lot of people falling into, and a trap that keeps people from developing a very effective verbal communication style, is they think that the way that I'm going to wow my audience and the way that I'm going to make that big impact is by making big, drastic changes to how I speak. And actually, the way that you wow your audience is through these more subtle changes. They are subtle but strategic. It is not about quantity, it is about quality. And this means that you don't have to be super loud, super extroverted, super perfect. You just have to be thoughtful in incorporating these techniques into the way that you speak to your audience. So I shared that example in the beginning where I contrasted kicking off a meeting without bias to action versus with bias to action. So to recap really quickly, without bias to action would be saying, welcome everyone. Today I'm going to be walking you through my team's product launch proposal. With bias to action would be you saying, welcome everyone. Today we are going to be approving my team's product launch proposal. I'm going to walk you through it, and then we're going to green light it so we can get this project underway. You can feel the difference between those, right? The first one feels still and stagnant, and the second one feels kind of like a horse where you start the horse race and the horse is off to the races. So we want that horse race galloping feeling to be persisting throughout the meeting. Now, I want to share a couple more examples of what this looks like because hearing examples is often the best way for you to internalize this. I love to teach through examples. So let's go into a couple more. Here's an example of adding bias to action when you are presenting a specific slide. And let's stick with the original theme of this is a product launch proposal. Let's say you have a slide that you're sharing and it shows the budget for the product launch. It's how much the product launch is going to cost. Now, most people, what they would do is they would walk through the information on the slide and they would say, okay, we've allocated a total of $2.25 million to this product launch. Here's how that breaks out across the various buckets. But if you want to present that same slide and demonstrate bias to action, you would say, all right, here's our $2.25 million budget. Here's how we allocated it across the different categories. These are reasons why. I want to ask you all, do you feel comfortable with this? Are you ready to greenlight this budget? Now you are asking something of your audience. You are moving the ball forward. You are maintaining that horse galloping momentum throughout your meeting. Now, of course, not every slide is going to be one where you need input from your audience, but you do want to keep your eyes peeled for places where you can tell your audience to give you feedback, where you can ask them a pointed question, where you can speak to them in a way that directs the meeting and the conversation forward. There's a really big difference between just sharing information versus directing a conversation in a forward direction. And one of the big ways you can do that is find the places where you need input from your audience and from your stakeholders and be very pointed and very direct in asking them for the feedback. And also ask it with confidence. Ask it with the certainty that everyone in the room is going to respond as soon as you ask the question. When you ask the question with that energy and with that confidence, people will respond to you faster. Okay, here is another example of demonstrating bias to action in the middle of a meeting. Something that happens really often in meetings is that people go on tangents, people hijack your meeting, people take your meeting down a rabbit hole that you did not consent to. This is a really important moment to demonstrate bias to action. A lot of people miss this opportunity. They let everyone go down the rabbit hole. They let the meeting unravel. You want to get in there and maintain that horse galloping momentum and recognize that we're not here for this tangent. We are here to approve this product launch proposal. So if you notice people going down a tangent, here's an example of how you can demonstrate bias to action. You can say something like this. You can say, I want to make sure that we land on an approval decision in this conversation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to table this particular topic so that we can revisit it later if we want to talk about it in more depth. Again, this isn't a dramatic shift, but this is demonstrating to people that you feel urgency around getting the result that you are there to get. When they see that you feel that urgency, they can trust you with bigger things. Those are the kinds of moments that give your boss the confidence that, oh, I can just let her do this on her own. I can give her the bigger project. I don't have to be in the room. She can handle this meeting without me. When you demonstrate that you are determined, that you're moving people forward, that you have bias to action, it gives your boss and leaders that confidence that you can take on bigger things independently. Now, the last place where you're going to display bias to action, and this is a place where most people already get this right. So a lot of people are good at displaying bias to action at the end of the meeting, but most people miss the opportunity to demonstrate it more at the beginning of the meeting and throughout the meeting. So the way that you demonstrate bias to action at the end of the meeting is by being very direct and very determined about next steps. So again, going back to the example of this product launch meeting, you might say something like, "Thank you so much for your input. We officially have the green light. I'm going to bring us together 1 month from now to share an update on progress and make sure that we are continuing to stay aligned on next steps." So again, we are showing bias to action because we are telling everyone what we are going to do next. And like I mentioned, most people are good at demonstrating bias to action at the end of a meeting. The end of the meeting tends to be a signal or a cue to our brains that we need to wrap it up and explain what's happening next. We kind of have that cue of like, oh, the meeting's ending, I've got to wrap it up. But we also want to make sure that we are demonstrating that bias to action throughout the entire conversation. This is what is going to help shape your audience's perception of you and help them see you as a leader. Now, because bias to action is so incredibly important, and because it is sometimes a subtle adjustment in language, I wanted to create an extra resource that goes with this episode that is designed to help you master bias to action. It is called the Bias to Action Worksheet. And it has 2 things that are really going to help you. 1, it has sample language of phrases that demonstrate bias to action so that you have more examples of this that you can draw on to help you understand what it should look like in your meetings. And the worksheet also guides you through how to identify the places in your meeting where there are opportunities to demonstrate bias to action. It will help you figure out how to take what I'm teaching in today's episode and apply it to your specific meetings, because everyone's meetings and everyone's situation is going to be a little bit different. To grab this worksheet, click the link in the show notes or go to jessguzikcoaching.com/bias to action, all lowercase, all one word. Again, I will put the link in the show notes. Remember, meetings are an opportunity to show people what you're made of. They're an opportunity not just to run a meeting, not just to get an approval, but to show people how you run meetings, to show people how you get approval, to show people how you get things done. And you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to feel 100% confident. You don't need to have the answer to every single question in order to show people that you are someone who shows up powerfully to get it done. All you have to do is be in the energy of someone who is determined to create forward momentum and make sure that the language that you use and the way that you speak to your audience comes from that energy. The worksheet will help you get more specific in applying this, so I definitely recommend grabbing it. Again, you can click the link in the show notes. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye!